What separates you from being a hero or a victim in your life story is a difficult choice that you have to make when you're faced with adversity. But if you tap into a superpower that you have within you, it can not only help you free yourself from the pain and suffering that can be inflicted from this mindset, but can finally free you from this victim mentality that has kept you trapped for quite some time. And to help illustrate how we typically fall into this mindset and how to get out, I'm going to share a methodology that I used to train in the corporate world, but is absolutely relevant in your personal life as well. So let's get into it. Now, I'm going to share with you a methodology called the transition curve. You may have or may not have seen this before, but I like it because it's very relevant in personal life. This is something that we used to train new franchise partners when they invested in the business and would prepare them for the upcoming stresses and problems that they would face within their first year of operating. And so when you look at this transition curve, you can almost like compare it to the experience of going on a roller coaster. Now, I don't know about you, but when you first go on a roller coaster, I get pretty nervous. And this first point of the roller coaster is when you typically get in the seat. All of a sudden, the bar comes down. You know you're strapped on for this ride. You can't get off, but you're absolutely excited as hell. This particular stage is called uninformed optimism. So you can imagine if you're a business owner, you're starting your business, you have no idea what to expect, but you're very excited. This is the exact stage that you're in. The same thing applies to when you get into a brand new relationship. You know, that whole honeymoon stage. You don't really know the person, but there's some feelings there. You're having a lot of fun, and you don't know what to expect. And it's really the excitement that's carrying you through. So that's the very first stage of the transition curve. It's called uninformed optimism. Now, over time, time can be, it could be a few days, it could be a few weeks, it could be a few months. Eventually, you get to the second point of the roller coaster. Now, again, going back to the roller coaster analogy, this is the point, usually the highest point of the ride, because it has to give you enough momentum to carry you through all the way to the end. And so for those of you who have been on a roller coaster before, you know this point can be very scary to be on. I personally don't like roller coasters, but I do kind of like the thrill of that point. But this is when you start to question, did I make the right choice? Like why did I even get on this ride in the first place? Or when you're going into your business, when the first few months have passed and you haven't made a profit or you haven't had any leads or haven't converted any sales, maybe you start to question in your mind, have I made the right choice? Same thing in relationships. This person that you've been dating for the past few weeks, past few months, all of a sudden something feels a little bit off. The honeymoon stage hasn't necessarily ended, but all of a sudden you start noticing things that you didn't notice before that might be annoying you about the person. Maybe this is what you call icks. I don't know what they call them nowadays, but this is the stage where it's called informed pessimism. So you know a little bit more about what you signed up for or what you're on the ride for, but now you're starting to get a little bit pessimistic because it's not everything that you expected it to be. Okay? Now, if more time passes, you will eventually reach a point on the roller coaster, on this curve, which is called crisis of meaning. So referring back to in the workplace environment or owning a business, this is where you're not getting sleep at night. You start to really question your ability to follow through on your commitment to run this business. It's the same thing in a relationship. All of a sudden, you're starting to realize, wait a second, this person was not the person who I expected them to be. Maybe you moved in too quickly and noticed that maybe they're not as clean as you. Maybe they don't floss at night like you do, something along those lines. But you're really starting to question the original decision that you made. And this should be a clear warning sign. But again, depending on your state of mind, the emotions at play, sometimes you could be very blind to this crisis meeting and you just continue to push through without taking any action or doing anything to kind of quell those concerns. So if you continue on and you don't do anything, there are some new possibilities that present themselves. So the typical one that a lot of people face, and I would say a lot of people in terms of like younger people, when I was a teenager, this was very common for me. So when I hit crisis of meaning at a job or in a relationship, I wasn't mature enough to actually take any action, and I would just essentially crash and burn. The relationship would end horribly with a lot of animosity. Same thing with the job. I would say, screw this. These guys don't appreciate me. They don't deserve me. I'm just going to quit and go find another job. And because I didn't do the work that I needed to do to actually figure out, well, wait a second, maybe there was some steps that I needed to take or things that I could do to fix the problem, I not only crash and burn, but then I carry that same mentality into the next relationship and into the next job that I took. Does that sound familiar? Almost as if to say, well, this job is going to be better because it's a different leadership team, it's different products and services I'm going to sell, different organization, it's going to be way better. But you're still going in with that victim mindset. And so for a very long period of time, especially when I was younger, I was very much stuck in that mindset of me against the world. Why me? Life isn't fair, and guess what? Life isn't fair, believe it or not. I used to blame a lot of external factors rather than actually looking at, some of the things within myself that was within my control. And so instead of crashing and burning, when you reach crisis of meaning, you also have some steps that you can take to figure out, okay, what can I do to make this situation better for myself? And the first thing clearly is, am I asking for help? I used to be very much in the mindset of I'm going to try to do it all on my own because, I'm an adult. I shouldn't need to reach out, but clearly nobody who's successful in life has ever gotten there alone. So you do need to ask for help. Help can come from, your coworkers, your manager, if this is a work situation. If it's a relationship, maybe you need to go see a counselor, or maybe you need to talk to some friends. But talking to someone, even if you need to use a confidential hotline, if you absolutely need to, if it's a private kind of issue, you need to talk to somebody, because getting it out will at least help you manage the emotions a little bit easier, but also maybe get an external perspective on the problem that you're trying to solve and the problem that you're trying to move past. And so when you start taking action, you may realize that you have to make a very difficult decision at that point. And that decision is, do I give up or do I give her? And it's depending on the situation, it might be there might be some clear indications that, this really just isn't working out. I need to just pass this and start a new opportunity. So sometimes you do need to make the decision to give up in a good way. Giving up isn't always a bad thing, but you need to take the steps necessary in order to determine that that's the best decision for you and everybody involved. Or you decide, do I give her? Now, depending on the situation, again, for me, in my case, I was in a broken marriage for over 10 years. Things weren't working. I was trying to do everything I could that was within my control, and things still wasn't working. We went to see counselors numerous times. There were some changes that I tried to make within myself, but ultimately, at the end of it all, things weren't working out. But I still continued to give her no matter what. And that was my fault. That's what caused me a lot of pain and misery, because then I started to really feel like the victim. I almost thought to myself, well, if I'm doing everything right, like, why am I still feeling shitty and being treated like crap by my ex and everybody around me? And it was because I continued to allow myself to stay in that situation, ultimately. So do I give up or do I give her? That is a difficult choice, again, depending on the situation, but there are some steps that you can take to help dig yourself out, or make a clear and a good conscious decision to now move on to the next opportunity, or to the next relationship, or maybe not. Maybe you want to be single for the next few years while you rebuild yourself. But the choice is yours. And so the biggest difference, again, between being the victim or the hero in your life, it really boils down to one thing. Are you holding yourself accountable for what is within your control? Because when you're in that victim mentality and you're experiencing pain and suffering, most likely it's because you're blaming external factors. It could be the people, it could be the situation. But remember, the only reason why you're in that situation in the first place is because of previous choices that got you there. So, it's a learning lesson that can be harsh sometimes. But when you take a moment to start taking accountability for the choices and actions that you took, it will help you to really relieve the pain and the suffering, because then you start to realize from a larger perspective that you were the one who was inflicting this pain all along to yourself. And that's where forgiveness comes into play. Forgiveness is also one of your superpowers. But in this particular case, to prevent getting stuck in that victim mentality, you have to take that step of holding yourself accountable and realizing that there are different choices and actions that you can take to get you out and to prevent yourself from falling into that pitfall, which is a huge learning lesson for a lot of us. And again, is why I wish they taught this kind of methodology in high school. Teenagers going through angst and puberty, they don't know how to control emotions very well. And I know I'm going to probably be covering this with my kids down the road. But that's really your superpower and the antidote to dealing with a victim mentality. So when you finally make that choice, coming back to the roller coaster, you reach this fourth point, which is called informed optimism. So you've been through the fire, you've been through the stress. In this particular case, if you've chosen to stick with it and you've gotten help and you're willing to keep going, you've decided to give her, you're well informed about the next obstacles that you may face, but you now know you have some better strategies to deploy once you start reaching those times of crisis and meaning. And so it's optimism because you've gained some new skills, you've gained some new perspectives and a new positive outlook on life, and it's going to help continue to carry you through the next challenge that you face. And the one thing that you'll have to also consider with this methodology or with this transition curve is, even though you're on point 4 or maybe you're on point 3, there are actually mini curves throughout the transition curve. So just because you're on the up and up, you have to be aware that something might trigger you falling back into that crisis of meaning stage, and you have to reflect back on, you'll have to revert back to those strategies to try to prevent yourself from crashing and burning and falling into that victim mentality. So that's the transition curve and the methodology that you can adopt in your life. I hope this was helpful if you're stuck, in a dark place. I hope that this was very informative to give you some additional strategies or to help you look at, your current situation in a different light, to find a way out, and that taking accountability is definitely a superpower that you have to help minimize the pain, but also steer your life story in the right direction to become the hero again. So with that said, thank you very much for your time, and I'll see you guys in my next video. Peace out.